Hey Carl, I have a joke for you. Okay, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb really has to want to change. He's- he really has to. Yeah, no, you don't, because Hi, and welcome to this video lecture. Today, we're going to discuss the idea of being an individual and what that actually means, and how the idea might be a little misleading. This is going to take us into three major ideas. First, we want to explore the idea of being an individual, the notion of individualism, and how this relates to the idea of independence. Second, we want to explore the idea of community and how that relates to the idea of being an individual. And third, we want to ask scientifically what it means to be me. That is, what it means to be an individual, an I. In all of these explorations, we're going to consider religious ideas, philosophical ideas, and scientific ideas. The ultimate goal of this video is to help you understand how being an individual might be more complicated than we typically think. So let's get started. First, the idea of individuals. Most people think that an individual is easy to define. It's a single person, a unique entity, someone separated from everyone else. You are an individual if you are here, and everyone else is over there, separate from you. This idea relates to the notion of individualism inasmuch as people are often encouraged to be individuals. And sometimes we even call this a rugged individualism. You are to be your own person. Don't follow the crowds. Don't worry about tradition. Don't worry about what other people are saying. Be yourself, true to yourself, your own person. Embrace that you are separate from everyone else. Now, the notion of the individual and the idea of individualism naturally lead us to the idea of independence. An individual, a good individual, is someone who has embraced their separation from others and has chosen to stand on their own 2 feet. Independence in that sense means I am not dependent on anyone else. I am wholly self-sufficient. In North America, especially the United States of America, we really admire and highlight the notion of independence. That makes sense if you think about it, Carl. We have a whole Declaration of Independence, don't we? Yes, I know a little bit about history, okay? Don't judge me. And we even have a sense of being able to stand up on your own, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, as some people say. It's the idea that you, the individual, should take complete control of your situation, complete control of your future, complete responsibility for everything negative and positive that you accomplish and that happens to you. And in this sense, you are wholly independent. You don't need anyone else for anything. Now, there are some positives about the idea of individualism and independence. Certainly, the idea of being overly dependent on others is problematic. And the idea of blindly following a tradition, blindly following a community, without questioning, without having any sense of identity or self, is also problematic. However, there are some dangers with this emphasis on individualism and independence. And in particular, the danger that I have in mind is the notion of independence, if taken too far, the notion of individualism, if taken too far, doesn't really give enough credence to what we know scientifically, philosophically, and religiously about an individual, a person. So let's explore this a little bit further. A lot of times when I talk to other Christians, they say, what's really important in life is my relationship to God. That's what really matters most. Am I right with God? And again, note the focus on the individual, me and God working together. In fact, for a lot of people, the idea of heaven is essentially me and God together for all times. I feel like that would get either really boring for me or really boring for God, or probably really boring for both of us. The problem with this idea is it doesn't quite do justice to what we find sometimes in the Bible with regard to what it means to be a person. Let me give you one example. In Genesis chapter 2, God creates the human being. The Hebrew word for human being is Adam, or as we commonly say, Adam. God creates Adam from the dust of the earth, and God places Adam in the Garden of Eden to till and to keep it, to take care of it. Now, it's only Adam and God in the garden. If it's true that the main goal of life was to be in a right relationship, a good relationship with God, then Adam is living in absolute paradise. It's just him and God. However, in Genesis chapter 2, God looks at Adam and says something very interesting. He says, it's not good for Adam to be alone. Think about that for a second. God is saying Adam's situation is not good because Adam is alone. But Adam is with God. It almost suggests then that a human being, an individual plus God, is still an individual being alone. In some sense, God is saying, I'm not enough for Adam. Adam needs more. So God creates all the animals and then Eve to be companions for this man, for Adam, the human creature. The point here is that in the Bible, human beings are made. We are designed in some sense for relationships to others, to other creatures, and to other human beings. Otherwise, we are alone, and God defines this as not good. Now, this raises another philosophical and scientific issue for us. Are human beings really meant to be alone? What we know about evolutionary biology suggests that our ancestors, those that were human and those that were not human, really bonded in groups. They tended to exist as tribes, as villages, as communities. In that sense, belonging to a group, whether it be a society, belonging to others, having some level of dependence on others, is built into our very evolutionary history. It's part of our genes, you might say. We are social creatures, communal creatures. In that sense, independence might be problematic because the notion of independence, if it really means not depending on anyone for anything, suggests that being in a community and being dependent on that community for love, for compassion, for companionship, and for success, that is problematic. However, all of that's built into our genes. So perhaps complete independence is not a great thing. But we can push this idea a little bit further. Human beings are social mammals, but there's more to human beings than just being socially externally. We are also very relational internally. Let me explain what I mean. Not too long ago, some scientists, as part of what's called the Microbiome Project. The Human Microbiome Project is an interdisciplinary study aimed at identifying and classifying the various microbes that live in the human body. Scientists who work on this project suggested that of the over 100 trillion cells that make up the human body, most of them are actually not human genetically. That is to say, they are non-human. In fact, by some estimates, the human body is only 10% human cells. The rest of the cells, 90% of this body that I am, are actually non-human, bacterial cells. This means that this body that I am is actually more non-human than it is human. The picture was even more radical when we talked about genes in the human body. By these scientists' estimate, human genes are outnumbered in the human body 1 to 300. That is, for every one human gene, there are 300 non-human genes in the human body. This is really fascinating because it suggests that our bodies, these bodies that we are made up of not only human, but also non-human creatures. In this sense, the scientists said that the human body is really a composite of the human and the non-human. If you feel a little grossed out about the idea that you're a composite of all these different creatures, and that most of you is actually these different creatures, at least with regards to cells and genes, that's true. They're there. Beware. Be at peace. Most of your weight is your own. Great. Now I feel like disgusting and fat. So the interesting thing to think about, based on the Human Microbiome Project, is that you, as an individual, are actually a collection of creatures. That is to say, your body is an ecosystem. You are an ecosystem, and actually a collection of ecosystems, because different groups of creatures collect at different parts of your body. Once we think of the individual this way, we begin to realize that the individual is actually a collection of creatures. The idea of the individual as a collection of entities is interesting, and it kind of goes against a lot of what we've said philosophically in the West. For example, René Descartes, one of the most famous philosophers in the West, dealt with the idea of his own existence by saying, I know that I exist because I think. This led to a very famous claim. I think, therefore I am, in the Latin cogito ergo sum. However, based on this notion of the individual as a collection of entities, we can say it's probably more accurate to say, I are, therefore I am. Descartes doesn't like that. I don't know what to tell you. The idea here is actually not dissimilar from some indigenous wisdom. For example, in certain African dialects, there's the notion of the individual existing only and primarily as part of a larger group. I am because you are, or I am because we are. So this notion of I are, therefore I exist, that is, I, the individual, am actually a plurality of entities, means that I could not be me without all these other creatures being them. And that's quite accurate scientifically. If all the bacteria in your body decided that they were going to go on strike and just leave your body behind, you would die instantly. I feel so dependent right now, Carl. It's rough for me. I'm really struggling here. So, once we consider how the individual is actually by nature a social creature, and biologically speaking, a collection of other entities, we begin to understand how connected we are to other creatures around us, and how dependent we are on other creatures around us. Without them, we couldn't be who we are. Without our community, we wouldn't be who we are. And the notion that all these creatures make up who we are suggests something very fundamental about the human creature. We are part of the world. We have tended to think of the human creature as different than the world. There's everything that's not human, and then there's us. But if we can say that the human creature, this body that I am, is made up of all these entities, then we can say, we are the world. We are the world. We are the children. You don't know that song, Carl? So let's just... All this to say, rethinking what it means to be an individual can help us to rethink the notion of individualism and the notion of independence. Independence is good insofar as it means we are healthy, vibrant people making contributions to the world around us, who are not overly dependent upon others, and who also contribute to our society, contribute to the world around us. However, if independence means we are not dependent on anyone or anything, well, that's just a big myth. Or, better yet, a lie. Nobody is independent in that sense. We all rely on other creatures, on other people, to make us who we are. So really, independence has to always be coupled with the notion of interdependence. I am depending on all the bacteria inside of me. All the bacteria inside of me are depending on me for life. Together, we create this symbiotic relationship that is me. Which is to say, I am human, but also extremely dependent, and in some sense I am the non-human as well. All this sounds really fancy and philosophical, but the point for this video is to ask you, how does rethinking what it means to be an individual, to be a person, help us to rethink what it means to be healthy? Well, in the one sense, it is essential that we consider relationships as part of who we are. We cannot be who we are without relationships. Taking care of our bodies, taking care of our communities, taking care of our friendships, taking care of the bacteria that live in us, all of this is essential to healthy living. And this means that we have to embrace the notion that we are interdependent with other creatures. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means you're a human creature who lives in the world. Embracing this interdependence without being overly dependent and without claiming to be completely independent is probably the healthiest place for us to be. So this is what I want you to reflect on for your forum entries. How does rethinking this notion of the individual, how does the importance of interdependence affect how we might live our lives, what we prioritize, and how we develop our relationships with others? As you write about this, think about how you actually might implement these ideas in your day-to-day life. How will it affect how you live tomorrow, the day after that, the day after that? I look forward to reading your thoughts. If you have any questions or need for clarification on the content of this video, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you walk through it as best I can. Goodbye.